Headlines has more.
Well, just in from the Copernicus Climate Change Service, November of 2023 was the warmest November on record, and probably to no one's surprise. 1.75 degrees Celsius, 3.15 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. Now, we didn't really start out in the record territory, but boy, we got there.
Look at that chart.
June, July, August, September, October, and now November were all records by a large margin in some spots. And yes, November of 2023 will take this line and push it all the way into record territory.
Wow.
There is very little, if anything, December can do to not make 2023, the entire year, the warmest year on record globally, because we are so far above where we should be. In fact, some days were even 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, above normal. There was a little bit of a perturbation in here in October and into November, but now we are so far above the old line, which was 2016, another El Nino year, that 2023 is going to be the warmest year on record for sure.
Climate activists are confronting heads of oil and gas companies.
You keep in mind that December the 10th, 2 years ago, is whenever Weakley County, O'Brien County, basically northwest Tennessee and western Kentucky got hit by massive tornadoes that just absolutely devastated various towns and communities. This is all contributed to climate change.
Heads of oil and gas companies at the COP28 summit. Protesters are calling for an end to the use of fossil fuels. This comes amid reports that a record number of people linked with the fossil fuel industry were registered for COP28, 4 times higher than last year. Here's more from one protester.
There are more fossil fuel lobbyists here, 7 times over, than official indigenous representatives. They're here unchecked, roaming free, and we're here to say it's time for big polluters to no longer be allowed to write the rules of climate action.
There's a new international effort to promote nuclear fusion as a clean energy source. US climate envoy Kerry announced the plan at COP28. The US-led global initiative will focus on fusion research, development, regulation, and economic potential. Nuclear fusion replicates the power of the sun and happens when 2 or more atoms are fused into a larger one, generating a massive amount of energy as heat in an exothermic reaction. Scientists say it could be a limitless carbon-free energy source without the nuclear waste. That does it here on CNN Newsroom. I'm Bianca Noblo in London. Early Start is up next.
Proof is in the pudding pertaining to the world getting hotter. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to see it. Well, listen to this.
Dismiss some of the things that he said. A lot of Republicans would repeatedly say, oh, you know, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. And then, of course, his term was capped by January 6th. What is your reaction? How do you understand what he said last night?
Look, I mean, part of it was his idea of what staying on message was about. And you can hear from the audience that they were cheering when he responded, close the border, drill, drill, drill. But at the same time, it's deliberate, clearly, that he did not deny the proposal about being a dictator on day one. And what we've learned from a first Trump administration is to take him seriously in that.
I go along with one of them towards closing the border, but I don't go along with drill, drill, drill. Crazy. He's been a climate denier all along. But yet now the statistics, the data proves otherwise. Crazy. Hold it, back up. Yep. This is part of that climate denier stuff right here.
moderate river gauges at the moment, but one major flood stage recorded at the still Squamish River at Arlington. This is in the state of Washington, actually recording a record level crest. So yeah, that is significant considering what's going on. Still are flood watches and flood warnings in place for millions of Americans as this fire hose of water still aims itself at the coast of Oregon and spills over into Washington as well. Look at the precipitation. It will pass through over the course of the weekend, and it will bring in cooler weather behind it. So we'll see that drop in our freezing level. That means more snow than rain, at least for the higher elevations. So
Irregularities.
The accumulation looking different than it did yesterday because we're going to start seeing the temperatures drop below freezing. There's the snowfall across the Rockies, throughout the Cascades, the Sierra Nevada range, but also along the coastal regions where we'll stay warmer than average.
But to see the
And that's where we'll
deluge,
start to see a few more inches of additional rainfall all the way into the North California coast. These pictures speak a million words here. Really, just incredible to see what's happening.
Yeah, well, and let's, a message to all those living through this. We hope you stay safe, and this wraps up without any further loss of life. Weatherman Derek Van Dam, thanks very much for being with us this morning. I'll see you tomorrow. President Biden trying to clarify a headline-grabbing offhand comment he made, what he's saying about it now. Plus, what happened when Fox asked Donald Trump if he plans to be a dictator if he wins back the White House?
let's go on. Put it high gear here. Let's see. Wow.
Right. Well, and Doug, you and I both know that the conversation right now is about what a second Trump term could look like. The Atlantic magazine has devoted its entire issue. They've just called it a warning. Liz Cheney out on a book tour talking about the threat he would pose, in her view, to democracy. And then last night with Sean Hannity, Donald Trump was pretty straightforward about what he would do. He was asked directly, and I think Hannity was trying to get him to say that he wouldn't be a dictator if he was elected, but this is actually how he answered the question. Take a look.
Under no circumstances, you are promising America tonight, you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
for?
he's going crazy. Except for day one. I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's
drill,
not. That's
drill.
That's not. No, that's not retribution.
I'm gonna be. He keeps. I love this guy. He says, "You're not gonna be a dictator, are you?" I said, "No. Other than day one, we're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator."
Proof is in the pudding.
CNN.
Innovation.
Entire family. Call or go online to get your.
Increased appetite and fatigue are also common. Side effects.
From the high school, that kind of thing. Senator Jack Keane has said, why don't we bomb a training center or a command and control center? My thought is, why don't we bomb an Iranian oil field? I mean, something to show American strength.
Their energy infrastructure, absolutely. That's what Ronald Reagan would have done. And the result would actually be a more peaceful planet. Ronald Reagan believed in peace through strength, and he didn't mind showing it when it was necessary.
Senator Wicker, thanks for leading the charge, sir. I hope you stay with it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
You
Call
bet.
anytime.
All right, thank you. All right, folks, I'll be right back with my last word or two.
Do you ever worry? Well,
Ships absolute.
Nothing there. Go back to here.
I expect so, but look, he is running, and I have to run. No, not now.
Joining us now, Republican strategist and political analyst for MSNBC, Susan Del Percio. Susan, good to see you. So the president yesterday, pretty revealing remarks, sort of saying out loud what a lot of people have speculated for some time, and some even in Biden's orbit have whispered privately, that this need to run for a second term is fueled by the desire, the patriotic duty even, to keep Donald Trump out of office. But what do you think of the fact that he now has said it out loud, that he is tying his fate so directly to Trump?
I think it was a big mistake. It's not a good look for anyone running for office to say, it's not that I really want to be president, it's just that it's the best thing for the country. That's it. It does translate to the voters. They feel it, especially with President Biden right now, who has a problem on the Democratic side with enthusiasm and getting people to the polls. It doesn't really inspire that get out and support Joe Biden. It's more like, well, he's who we have.
So there have been a number of stories written in recent days with some really good reporting.
Actually, it puts his motives in the wrong direction towards wanting to be
Continued
president,
dispersion.
to want to help the people.
Another sector like healthcare, XLV, or even biotech inside of that, those have been laggards. So I'd like to really find out where people have lost interest, because that will allow for outperformance in 2024.
All right, Jeff Kilberg with the stock picks and sector picks. Thank you very much. Happy holidays, sir.
You too, pal. See you soon.
All right. Markets right now are bidding the pre-market. We'll see if Squawk Box comes up and takes things.
Because the essential ingredient to a democracy, to a democratic republic, is the ability to freely and frankly vigorously debate about the issues that we face, whether it's political issues, social issues, cultural issues. And if you cannot have that debate, if you are not allowed to speak, because if you do, you will lose your job, you will be harassed and intimidated on social media platforms, you can't engage in that debate. You know, if you're going to lose your position in academia because you're doing what is supposed to happen in academia, which is to have open debates and discussions, we are no longer going to have a democracy.
Any politician that seems to think that regulating political speech is a good idea has lost the soul of being an American. They've lost the soul of being an American.
As for the future of free speech in America, the next battle will most likely be in the courts. This is especially true when it comes to big tech and social media, and whether or not they are determined to be public or private platforms.
The key issue there is, at what point does a private company become a public forum? You know, that's part of the issue there. And remember, when Donald Trump ended up in a lawsuit with Twitter, because remember, he wanted to not have certain people be allowed to follow his account. And the courts ruled that he couldn't do that, because even though Twitter was a private platform, in some ways they likened Twitter to being like a public park. And therefore he could not restrict the ability of people to follow him. And I think you have to apply the same analysis to Amazon. Yeah, in normal terms, it's a private company, so they can sell what they want. But are they becoming a public forum? Do they have a monopoly? Is that something where the government needs to come in and regulate? Just from that's the legal question. From a moral standpoint, what they're doing is completely wrong. In fact, it reminds me of what started happening in Italy and Germany in the 1930s. And yeah, they're not actually burning books, but they're doing the equivalent of that on the internet.
And have Amazon, and people still be supporting Amazon, they really don't care. They'd rather get their shoes delivered to them the next day, or they'd rather get their groceries delivered to them instead of going to the grocery store than withholding their dollars. The people that are standing around the Nazis' book burning are as guilty as the Nazis doing the book burning. And too many Americans are standing around watching the book burning.
Wow. That's a statement.
It was 2016, and the Armageddon election had arrived as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton went into the arena. Candidate Trump appeared outnumbered by every count. Members of his own party sniped at him, while Hillary Clinton and her supporters outraised the political newcomer by a margin of 3-1, building a war chest of over $1 billion. Day and night, businessman Trump was pummeled with ads attacking his character, his policies, and everything he stood for. And by some accounts, the big media provided Hillary with over $3 billion in earned media. That's news and press accounts that were biased against Trump and cost Hillary nothing. But beating all the odds, Donald J. Trump won. The American people wanted a fighter, and they got one. Hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle, and this is the Trump Wars Battle for the GOP.
The single biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there.
Lion Ted. What's your name? My name's Lion Ted Cruz.
He's always calling me Little Marco. So Donald is great at the one-liners, but he's a chaos candidate.
Somebody said he has pathological disease. I know you're embarrassed, but keep swinging, man. Swing for the fences.
This is a tough business.
Oh, I know you're a tough guy, Jim.
Donald Trump was not and is not a politician. He's a businessman. He cut his teeth in one of the most cutthroat markets in the entire world, high-end real estate in Manhattan. That's not politics, that's the real world. A tough business where you reward your friends and you punish your enemies. When it comes to doing, saying, or tweeting something in an attempt to upset his enemies, President Trump is an expert of the highest order. Now, few may have realized it at the time, but when Donald and Melania Trump took that trip down the escalator in June of 2015, history was being made.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
You know, given his spectacular, almost miraculous success, it's hard to remember just how unlikely this candidacy seemed to be. But incredibly, this political novice would begin to systematically dismantle an impressive field of 16 other Republicans running in the primaries, many seasoned politicians, including frontrunner former Florida Governor Jeb Bush.
This is a tough business to run for
I know
president.
you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is real tough. You're never going to be president of the United States by insulting your way to the
Let's see, I'm at 42 and you're at 3, so far I'm doing better.
Doesn't matter.
So far I'm doing better.
You said in September 30th that ISIS was not a
Am I
not a
talking
factor.
or are you talking, Jeb?
I'm
You can
talking
go
right
back.
now. I'm talking.
You can go back. You're not
I'm
talking.
talking.
You interrupted me,
September
Jeb. Are
30th,
you going
you
to
said it.
apologize, Jeb? No. Am I allowed to finish?
Yes, one at a time.
Excuse
Go ahead,
me. Am
Mr.
I allowed to finish?
Go ahead, Mr. Trump.
So,
Little of your own
again,
medicine there.
I know you're trying to build up your energy,
Please.
Jeb, but it's not
One
working.
at a
very well.
time.
Now, here was something we'd never seen before. Gloves off counterpunching against the heir apparent to the nomination, and it became one of Trump's favorite pastimes.
Do you think Jeb Bush is scared of you or just scared in general?
I think he's scared. I defined him. I gave him this term, low energy. I said he's a low energy individual.
I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
When we come back, Trump takes on the rest of the field, and Ted Cruz finds himself in some hot water.
Hey, Mom, if I could talk, what would I tell you?
And everyone doesn't get equal treatment. But you stop and you think about 13 grand a year, a lot more than everyone else. Japan spends about $4,700 per person. Stop and think about the difference. And I know, but Rick, we get such better care. We get such better outcomes.
These threats and what measures it is encouraging federal agencies in particular to adopt to help secure this critical infrastructure in our country?
Yes, sir. Matter of fact, a very timely question now that we're coming to the end of Critical Infrastructure Protection and Resilience Month. We work with all sectors to ensure that they can mitigate the threats they face. Just recently, we published a toolkit in collaboration with HHS for public health. With respect to substation security, we've been working with Department of Energy for well over 10 years. All across the nation, we have protective security advisors who will support the local electricity providers to do security assessments at their substations. We're all familiar with what occurred at Metcalf back in 2013, and we totally support the critical infrastructure protection regulation that NERC then followed that event. And as we've seen recently, they've with respect to the threats, Metcalf was focused on the generation of electricity. We're now seeing at distribution sites, and we're seeing a increase with respect to ballistic type attacks. So we're working with electricity providers with their risk management process to see how best to mitigate the threats at those substations. There's many options, and every substation is very unique. So we'll continue to support them. As mentioned in public health, we're supporting water and wastewater with respect to their cybersecurity requirements. And as you recall, back in March, we released the cybersecurity performance goals, which are focused on that information technology and operational technology, which with respect to the cyber threat speaks to many of the lifeline subsector cyber risk that they face.
Great, thank you. Director Klein, back to some personnel issues. We've talked about the vacancies and training, but I know in order to supplement folks, you have hired a number of contract guards to help protect the facilities. So I want to question is, when you hire these contract folks, how do you conduct oversight to ensure that they've received the necessary training to protect these federal facilities that require usually additional training than you may get from a contract guard?
So the Protective Security Officer program has been around I joined FPS 21 years ago, and it was in place before I joined. So these are the people that you see at our federal facilities. They are conducting screening operations, X-ray magnetometer. They're conducting roving patrol security operations around the federal facilities. They're staffing facility command centers to review video surveillance system monitors, and they are basically the first line of defense at those federal buildings that you're going to enter, those highest risk federal facilities. They have the PSOs at the entrances doing that screening operation. They also ensure that the federal employees that are coming in, that they have the required access media or ID cards to get into the facility. We spend a lot of time during compliance assessments and inspections of the PSOs every year. We do this through post-inspections where our inspectors will visit their assigned facilities and do inspections of the protective security officers that are assigned to that building. We also have a database where all of their training records are maintained, and we can see that on a daily basis. It also alerts us if any of those training requirements are come out of date. We don't allow that protective security officer to stand post until their training requirements are fulfilled. Have 13 different training requirements that they have every year that they have to meet. And then also their suitability background investigations is almost identical to what most federal law enforcement officers are. We spend a lot of time overseeing these contracts. We do a lot of these contracts throughout the country. We're visiting with them every day. So right now at this minute, there's about 6,250 protective security officers on duty across the country and our territories. We know how critical of a role they play in the defense of our protective facilities, and we spend a lot of time ensuring that their training records are maintained properly, that they are meeting all the requirements, and that they are complying with the requirements of the post orders at their specific facility.
Right. Well, thank you. And I want to thank each of our witnesses for being here today. I certainly appreciate your contributions to this discussion, and appreciate all the men and women who work for your respective agencies, keeping us safe each and every day. Protecting our federal facilities and the Americans who use them every day is absolutely fundamental.
Wow, what a joke. They can't even protect the Capitol building.
Women's organizations, the UN and others, finally recognize it. That was the issue.
The systematic.
We'll talk about this more.
Willie, it was systematic. It was planned. it was filmed and it was distributed so the whole world could see this absolute barbaric behavior toward women. And there are still people who want to equivocate.
Yeah, not only is it explicitly in their planning documents, so we know that this was part of a strategy, but it's also on GoPro. So if you want to be a truther and pretend these things didn't happen on October 7th, shame on you. But we are hearing that equivocation. I think, Joe, it probably amounts to a lot of people who think Israel is bad generally and wrong here. And so everything that happens in this war, they have to lump themselves on the other side. As we've said many times, you can want a good life for the Palestinian people. You want to respect their humanity, the civilians. You can think that Israel is prosecuting the war wrong, if that's your opinion. But my God, if you can't say what happened on October 7th is inhumane and grotesque and wrong and bad, there's just something wrong with you. So we'll come back to this war in just a moment. But let's also turn to Ukraine, because the aid that the United States has been providing for the last almost 2 years now is into question. Republicans so far are saying if foreign aid is part of a national security bill, the bill also must include money for the southern border. Yesterday, Senate Democrats unveiled a $111 billion national security package, which includes foreign aid and measures targeting the border. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he would give Republicans a vote on a Republican-written border policy amendment if they vote today in favor of opening debate on the foreign aid package, so do it separately. The offer was rejected by his counterpart in the Senate, Republican Mitch McConnell. Yesterday, Schumer warned his Republican colleagues what is expected of them and what the Republican Party of old would think about it.
If Republicans want to bring up immigration right now, right in the middle of trying to pass aid to Ukraine and other issues, the onus is on them to present serious bipartisan proposals that can get broad support from Democrats. Ronald Reagan would be rolling in his grave, if he saw his own party let Vladimir Putin roll through Europe.
Our politicians is creating a quagmire for its people. And because of it, there's going to be horrendous complications and horrendous circumstances involved in what our politicians has failed for the American people.
So once again, I urge my Republican colleagues to think carefully about what's at stake with this week's vote. What we do now will reverberate across the world for years and decades to come.
So, Jack, you take us inside the dynamics in the Senate. The House is one thing, obviously, but the Senate, this briefing yesterday, a bipartisan briefing, where the Department of Defense, Department of State tried to prevail upon Republicans to get the Ukraine funding passed. They say if we don't fund them, they're going to lose the war, that Putin's going to roll through Ukraine. But they want attached to this legislation, border protections, border security money. Schumer, as we heard there, says we will do that, but let's do it separately. How is this going to play out?
That is the fundamental issue here, that Democrats ultimately do not want to appropriate this money with border funding, and Republicans don't trust Democrats enough. They don't trust what Senator Schumer just proposed there to do this separately, because they don't think that it will ultimately get pushed through. And this is life with such slim majorities in both the Senate and the House, where these 2 to 3 vote majorities, it makes it all but impossible to get things through this highly contentious and polarized environment, especially on these issues, immigration and foreign aid, especially when the Republican Party, the tides have clearly turned towards this more isolationist posture, and overall foreign spending in general is becoming increasingly popular. And the more and more the administration and Democratic lawmakers on the Hill try to make the case that we should be dedicating more money towards Ukraine, Israel, etc. Even foreign funding for climate projects and really, spending across the board, the more Republicans are doubling down on their desire to withhold that money and then sort of redirect the attention to the lack of funding that the Biden administration is throwing their weight behind when it comes to the border, which if you talk to any progressive Hispanic congressional caucus groups, they simply don't believe that money will make any sort of difference on the border, that there is an inherent policy problem when it comes to immigration, and that just throwing resources, more border patrol, et cetera, is not going to make any kind of difference and is really just sort of a performative throwing some red meat at an issue to rile up the base ahead of a big election year.
Jonathan Lemire, that may be what progressive lobbying groups think on Capitol Hill. That is not what independent voters, that is not what swing voters in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada think. It's not even close to what they think. Immigration is a massive issue and will be a massive issue in 2024 for these groups. Maybe not the general electorate at large, but for these groups, this is going to be a significant issue. You go through any polling, you look through polls with independent voters in New Hampshire and independent voters in all of these places. The border actually is, because there's chaos there. And we have said Barack Obama and Joe Biden's administration, when they left, had the lowest number of illegal border crossings from Mexico in 50 years. Things have gotten worse through the last two administrations. So I guess I don't understand. Tell me what the thinking is of Democrats. I don't understand why Democrats don't trade Ukraine funding for strong border security. We've said it here before. If I were Democrats, I would say, okay, Republicans, I see your border security bill and I raise you some. They have to go into this election showing independent swing voters, disaffected Republicans. Let me say the states again. In Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, let me add New Hampshire to that. Voters who want to see this White House and this Democratic Party doing something significant on border security.
Yeah, and those in the White House will say privately they recognize that border security and immigration writ large is a real political weakness for this president heading into his election year. I think there is a willingness to deal, but it's a question of how much and what they want to be seen as doing. But now the Republicans some Republican senators still want to make this happen, but they seem to be at a real impasse right now. And Jackie, people I talked to on the Hill last day or so, they feel like the votes just aren't there, that they're just really not sure how this package is going to get done, that we're going to barrel into the winter holidays, that recess, unable to provide aid to Israel or Ukraine, to come up with border security, none of it. And I'm curious as to, A, what you think in terms of your own whip count, if you will, but also to talk to us about the role Mitch McConnell is playing in this, who for so long was a champion, a real champion among Republicans for Ukraine aid, but now seems to be somewhat diminished his ability to get a deal done.
McConnell's totally seen the writing on the wall and actually advised his members to vote against the package because he thinks that they need to take a stand and sort of take this show vote to show that they're not going to budge on border security. But the conversations that my colleagues and I have been having all week, and actually really since last week, is that we need to reckon with the fact that Ukraine funding is probably not going to get done. Even Israel funding, which every single person in the U.S. Congress is mostly behind. There are some discrepancies on, how many conditions or assurances some people want. Bernie Sanders came out with that letter yesterday that called for the U.S. to take, for Biden to at least enforce currently existing U.S. laws when it comes to appropriating that aid to Israel and the way that they're spending that, making sure that they're not bombing civilians with U.S. bombs as they continue their attack on Gaza. But I doubt, and you heard GOP members say this last week, that any of this is going to get done, if anything does get done, before Christmas. You had Max Miller, one of the only Jewish members in the House GOP conference, say last week that he was infuriated by this, that even in the case that something did ultimately come to the House floor in this very little time left before the Christmas holiday, Christmas recess, that Speaker Johnson has still said that there needs to be offsets when it comes to Israel funding. That's not going to go through in the Senate. So it is, McConnell and Johnson are at odds with each other, and it's reflective of the entire system and the way things are working in Congress right now.
Well, what an absolute shock that the new speaker is once again a raging hypocrite. Once again, on just about everything. He said, I can't believe, again, read the Bible, what? Hypocrisy, lying? It is constant. Offsets? Did he talk about offsets with Donald Trump when Johnson?
January 6th.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. He lies about it through his teeth. I don't know. I haven't read that in the Gospels. I haven't read it, that you can lie if you want to gain power. You can lie. It's like Liz Cheney talking about her conversations with Mike Johnson, going, this is wrong. Your constitutional law. He goes, yeah, I know it's wrong. I know there's no basis for what I'm doing. Basically, I know I'm lying, but I want to get close to Donald Trump. Like the pursuit of power, he's actually become. He's just like a televangelist. He really is. It's Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, 2023. And he's lying to Republicans. He's lying to evangelicals. He's lying through his teeth. And now, even on something as small as offsets, we have to have offsets. We have to talk about, despite the fact that Donald Trump and I raised the deficit and raised the national debt more in 4 years than any president did for the first 220 years in American history. Now he wants offsets. It's so hypocritical. Sam Stein, though, I've got a question. I asked about, and this is why I think this deal makes so much sense. I asked about the Biden administration. Why don't they do the deal on border security, be strong and tough, right? Well, I'm wondering, do the Republicans really want to go into 2024 being the party that allowed Vladimir Putin to complete his invasion of a sovereign country in Europe? First time since Hitler and like 1941. Does he really want to be, do Republicans really want to be that party? And do they want to be the party that won't fund Israel against Hamas? That's how it's lining up.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to what each party thinks is the potency of each issue, right? Democrats recognize, if you talk to them, that they have a vulnerability when it comes to migration at the southern border, border reform policies. In fact, our reporting indicates that the Biden administration in particular is pressing Hill Democrats to get a deal. They both recognize that it is a logistical nightmare at the border. They're hearing from tons of Democrats in municipalities as well as governors who say we are getting inundated with migrants being shipped up to us or making their way to us. And they also know that Republicans will use this as an issue. On the flip side, to your point, Joe, you got to wonder, are there some Republicans out there saying to themselves, do we want to go into 2024 being the ones who voted down a package for Ukraine and Israeli aid that be used against us? I think it can. I mean, you would have to imagine in prior times that would be a vulnerability politically, all of which suggests that there might be opening for some sort of deal or pared down deal. But of course, everything is sort of like, it's all about the details, right? You know, if you go into the details of the immigration policy reforms, each side agrees that there should be reforms to the asylum system, but they have disagreements over whether there should be an end to humanitarian parole, for instance. And so it's like the nitty-gritty details that this thing's going to live or die. And right now, it looks like it's not on a path to salvation, honestly.
All right, coming up in just 1 minute, The Atlantic's Frank Foer will join us with his piece for the special issue.
Unbelievable in a way.
Concerns for the environment grow and our societies become more digitalized. NGK Insulators have created groundbreaking ceramic products for a sustainable and connected future. NGK Insulators, surprising ceramics.
Do you have a box of videotapes, film reels, or photos? Buying a car from Vroom is so...
we are expecting a higher opening. Dow Industrials right now up 39, the Nasdaq up 40, the S&P 500 higher by 8 3/4. What a year we have had. Take a look at the markets year to date with these double-digit moves across the board. Dow Industrials up 9% for the year so far, but the Nasdaq is up 36% year to date. The S&P 500 higher by almost 19%. Year to date. Technology, of course, moving this market year to date, and it is up again this morning as Apple's market cap has closed now above $3 trillion for the first time since August. Joining me right now is Anderson Capital Management Chief Investment Officer Peter Anderson. Peter, great to see you. Thanks very much for being here. What's your reaction to Apple now at $3 trillion and how technology has really been leading this market? I know they talk about the Magnificent Seven, those 7 companies that have taken us to these major gains for the year.
Well, certainly it's a milestone, but I only think of it as a milestone, Maria. You know, it's curious to me because most tech companies are spouting out about artificial intelligence with a great deal of volume, and we're hearing hardly anything from Apple about AI, and I do think that's a concern because Apple really has just identified itself basically as an iPhone manufacturer, and going forward, I'm not sure that's going to have a lot of gas in the tank, frankly.
So you don't think the innovation is there to continue the growth story that we're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when have you last used Siri in a way that has actually been successful when you ask it a question? I mean, it's frankly, I think it's an embarrassment considering how far AI has evolved so far.
Yeah.
And yet Apple really is conspicuously silent on artificial intelligence. So I'm not sure what its next bag of tricks is going to be,
Would you
say through 2024 and beyond.
Would you sell into this rally in Apple then? Sell the stock?
I have never been a holder of Apple in my entire career, so that tells you one thing. And secondly, I would say once Steve Jobs moved on in life, so to speak, Apple really did take a dramatic turn in its strategy, and I have never thought of it as a major innovator. I just think of it now as a replicator of iPhones. I mean, do we need 7 camera lenses as opposed to 6 on the next iPhone release?
Right.
So when I think of it that way, there are so many more alternatives in technology, especially that are on the cutting edge of discoveries.
Yeah, like which one?
Well, of course, NVIDIA. I mean, I've been a holder of NVIDIA for almost 10 years now, and it certainly is not exhausted in its efforts to support artificial intelligence. Supermicro Computer, for instance, that's another brethren of NVIDIA that I think will do very well next year and beyond.
Whoa.
Aid to Ukraine. His comments coming just a few hours after a very, very tense bipartisan classified Senate briefing on Israel and Ukraine devolved into a shouting match over immigration. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says it started when Republicans insisted on turning the conversation from foreign aid to border security.
Well, it was immediately hijacked by Leader McConnell. Then, when I brought up the idea that they could do an amendment and have the ability to get something done on border, you know, they get stuck. They got stuck. They didn't like it. And even one of them was disrespectful and started screaming at one of the generals and challenging him to why he didn't go to the border.
Now, Republicans in the room blasted the briefing as a waste of time, with some shouting and even walking out early. The border, of course, has been a central sticking point in the negotiations over President Biden's $106 billion aid package, with Republicans warning very clearly they won't vote for it unless it includes tighter immigration policies. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said tensions only escalated yesterday because nobody addressed the border.
A lot of tension in the room because nobody talked about the border. In case you don't have a television or you've been living in a cave, you would know that most Republicans feel like we need to address the broken border.
Now, the White House proposal already includes $14 billion in border funding for additional staffing, judges, and asylum officers, but Republicans have been very clear. They want significant policy changes along with that funding to secure their support for the overall package. Schumer says he will still move ahead with the procedural vote on the package today. His time is running out to send critical aid to Ukraine before its funding runs out.
reiterated yesterday that among their first targets would be the news networks that Donald Trump opposes, that they're making clear they're coming. They said, we're coming for you if Trump were to win again. And there had been some debate within the Biden world as to the best approach. Joe, you and I have talked about this a lot this year, about how over the summer they really try to focus on more of a pro-Biden, Bidenomics positive message.
Doesn't work.
That shifted. And I first reported, and we've talked about it right around the election day, about a month or so back, this campaign pivoted, and they are now drawing contrast after contrast after contrast with Trump. They've gone on the attack. They have basically every day highlighted something Trump has said and said, look, this is what he did before in his first term. This is what he's promised again in the second term. We won't be the same country on the other side were he to be president again.
Right, and I gotta say, Willie, the New York Times piece talking to the governor saying, oh, you know, he should just stay away from Donald Trump. That worked really well for Rand Paul. That worked well for Marco Rubio. That worked well. It's working well for Republicans who say, oh, you know, we're gonna just talk about how green the pastures will be and how daffodils will sprout throughout America if we're allowed to be. No! They're running against a guy that wants to destroy democracy. If you want to beat him, you have to destroy him politically. Politically. Day in and day out. And go after him day in and day out. But again, all these candidates keep thinking we can win if we just ignore Donald Trump.
Even the Republicans.
The Republicans. All the Republicans think that. We can just win if we just ignore Donald Trump. It doesn't work.
It's not working in the Republican primary, that's for sure. And what if, as the White House and the Biden campaign would argue, you could do both things, which is go after Donald Trump and brag about the economy and brag about the infrastructure bill and the achievements you think you've had over the last 4 years. That's how you run a campaign. So they're starting to...
I've heard enough. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us. Chaos. God bless our military. God bless the United States. And God, please bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on. Shalom.